Hi, I'm Priscilla Cole with the Geospatial Risk Summit, and I'm on today with Ken Zockoll from Spatial Risk Systems. Hi, Ken.
Hi, Priscilla. Great to be here.
You were up on a panel at the Geospatial Risk Summit. And first, I want to ask you if there are highlights from the conference overall.
The conference was a great opportunity. Being new, relatively new to the GIS space, made a great bunch of connections. I probably did more in one day than I would have made in 6 months. From a subject matter perspective, I really enjoyed it. Learned a lot.
Up on your panel, Portfolio Risk and Response, you were the only representative from finance. There were other people who were representing insurance and some community aspects.
The market difference is basically how data is acquired. On the insurance company side, the insurers work directly with their clients or companies, and those companies will provide asset data, location data directly to the insurers. On the financial side, that's not the case. You actually have to go out and build a database of all the asset locations for publicly, private, and government entities. It's a fairly significant collection undertaking.
Yeah, and there's also the aspect of time that came up on the panel.
There are long-term and short-term issues. From a timing risk perspective, forward-looking climate intelligence providers in the space are going to go out 10, 15, 30 years. The whole period for portfolio managers is measured in months or years. It's not going to be that long. And even on the insurance side, it was interesting. I found out is that even insurers are probably only go out 5 years. So having access to historical data becomes very important.
In our prep, you were talking about how much you heard from satellite companies and some trends that you were noting.
There's some satellite commercial companies out there looking to be vertically integrated. There are different commercial models. A lot of the satellite companies take the hardware in space and deliver the finished report to the client. So they're not just providing basically a raster data to other providers. They're fully integrated models.
There are folks at the conference that's a big mission of theirs. Will Cattle has produced several different blogs and reports about how satellite companies can better commercialize their data, of becoming vertically integrated and pushing for that rather than this other model of, you just push the data out and then you need these third-party intermediaries that are good at doing the analytics. Not so much success in getting companies to just take in this raw data and develop the whole thing internally themselves. Also, Mike Spaeth was up there talking about geospatial foundation models.
Yeah, Mike gave a great presentation. It's just, how are we going to get there? The execution risk is probably going to be a little high. It's the time to market to get a really viable model, but I think it's part of the future.
There's so much data out there, and trying to make it easily accessible, trying to get it to lay on top of each other, to make it queryable. I see a lot of this is trying to structure raster data so that it looks more like vector data, which is the space that you play in.
You think about raster data from an AI perspective. We've nailed computer vision. We're looking at pixels. It's a dog versus a cat. It's easy to understand that. On the vector side of things, you have a point or you have a boundary, right? What kind of data can you pull together to describe what's happening at that point or boundary level? And that's where we come in, right? So there's so many open data sources out there that could pertain to environmental impacts, carbon emissions, socioeconomic factors connected to that, basically that point on the ground, connecting dozens of open data, regulatory data sources, consolidating it into a knowledge graph structure. A point here, 10,000 factors or attributes we can describe about that point. Learn a lot just from providing that context.
Every time we talk, Ken, the conversation goes into this direction, what you've described as a data connectivity arms race, or just who's going to win the war of data engineering.
Look, I'm a firm believer in it based upon how I grew up. I made a lot of mistakes early on in my career, but I eventually got it right. If we can connect and standardize things, you can play the AI guy much more effectively. I think that's the future. Spatial graph on the vector side, raster data, and merging those two data layers together.
Tell us what you're working on right now at Spatial Risk Systems.
Focusing on building out global reference data set of key infrastructure assets around the world: energy, electricity, manufacturing, waste management, and identifying the owners of those assets, their environmental impacts, climate risk exposures, and local socioeconomic factors. The finance sector is now moving to a geospatial layer. That's going to be part of the ecosystem, we believe, on a forward-looking basis. The market is starting to shift. They're moving towards now looking at asset level data to understand the climate impact of their investments. If you own shares in the company, you may want to know where their operating assets are and how it could potentially impact valuation. And so we're building this global asset data set of key infrastructure, their environmental impact, how they interact with the environment, carbon emissions, what the climate exposure or risk exposure is at that location, and the local socioeconomic factors, along with, the facility function and ownership, which is a key piece of the puzzle.
That's important, not only understanding what's happening at those facilities, but their interconnectivity to each other. And I'm sure that that trickles into some supply chain questions for your clients.
From a supply chain perspective, the Holy Grail identifies supply chains from facility to facility. Collecting asset data allows you to basically identify supply chain relationships and how they could be impacted by weather events, for example.
Ken, it's been good talking to you. Do you think that you would come back next year?
Priscilla, thanks for your time today. I would love to come back next year. It was a great event and look forward to seeing everyone again.
Wonderful. All right. Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.